Hi, good morning, guys. I hope you're all well. So this is a live streaming event only for our members. So glad you're all glad you guys were able to join today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a little presentation. If there's any comments, just drop them down on YouTube, and I will try to answer them live. As I say, the developer zone at the moment, it's nice and small and exclusive. So I'm really happy that you guys have joined. And I want to kind of make this developer zone really, sort of focused on you all. So yeah, so I really hope that that's useful to you. So what I'll do now is one of our members, DMAS, we have a Discord server, and that Discord server is a sort of private server that is just for us all to have a chat with. And on that, Dimas said, he talked about the kind of things that he was interested in. And so I thought I'd make today's live streaming just suitable, or not just suitable, but we'll focus on some of his research and how biosensing can be brought into that research. So when I read his profile either on ResearchGate or Google Scholar, then I could see that he was interested in things like antioxidants and polyphenols, and maybe some anti-inflammatories. But I really got a sense of things like, as I say, antioxidants, anti-inflammatories, and polyphenols. So, what I'll do now is this. So I did go through it, and as I say, the key words that kind of came out for me were these words. And I think when you're thinking about antioxidants and anti-inflammatory and polyphenols, useful words to have in mind are reactive oxidative species, reactive oxidative metabolites, and I just put a little note there for myself as for hydrogen peroxide, because hydrogen peroxide does fall into this category. So there's when I look at Dima's work, he's kind of interested, I think, in foods and nutrients and their effects on things like their antioxidative behavior, and their sort of possibly their effect on improving human health. So I want to address ways, for example, that we could make sensors for polyphenol. So what I'll do is this is an old slide that you guys have seen me give, and I looked up the structure of polyphenols. I knew what the polyphenol was, but a polyphenol has aromatic rings and OH groups coming off it. And I just wanted to draw your attention to, so somebody says to me, oh, I'm interested in doing polyphenols, then I could also say to them, well, there's some good evidence that you can make a sensor for polyphenols, because if you look at our capsaicin sensor for chili, and I know I've played this little animation for you guys in the past, it literally is a phenol sensor, because when you look at capsaicin, it has that OH group there. I mean, that is a phenol center, and so it's similar to some of the more the phenols that some of these polyphenols where they have several OH groups. But actually, in capsaicin, it does have two OH groups. It has one here, and then what we call a protected OH group here. So the quick summary on this slide is you can definitely make sensors for polyphenols, and in fact, the capsaicin is a good example of that. I want to slightly then say, doing the direct electrochemical detection of polyphenols on screen printed electrodes is very possible. I also want to draw your attention to the idea of using MIPs. This is molecular imprinted polymers. So with a MIP, you have a template molecule. So if you're interested in, for example, measuring polyphenols, you have you take your polyphenol of interest and you cause a polymerization around your template. Now, the expert on this will be in my next slide, so we'll talk about Hasim's work in a minute. But for example, Hasim has taken the molecule of interest and he's polymerized around it, and that then gives him also an artificial recognition system, because he causes, when he removes his template, he has these pockets or binding sites that can then bind with his molecule of interest. And this kind of idea of using MIPS to detect phenols has already been done. And the nice thing about this work was they actually did it on what's called a boron-doped diamond electrode. Now, the thing about boron-doped diamond electrodes is it's very hard to convince the governments that, I can take that technology and I can make a low-cost sensor for the use in the food and agricultural industry. It's really hard to persuade them that, because boron-doped diamond electrodes, you can almost tell by the name, it's not a low-cost type of electrode. So the work is good. So you can use MIPS to make these molecular imprinted, or you can use the technology to make these molecular imprinted polymers, and you can use them to bind phenols, and there's some good literature precedents for that. And I would ask you to kind of take a look at this article. Now, this video will be up on YouTube, so you'll be able to go back through this later on. Now, if you do look at Hasim's paper, so the highly selective electrochemical nanofilm sensor for the detection of carcinogens, PAHs, polyaromatic hydrocarbons in environmental samples, what Hasim has done is he's taken the principles of MIPS and he's done it for polyaromatic hydrocarbons. But in my the paper earlier on says that, in fact, Hasim could have also done it for polyphenols. So I recommend this paper, or these two papers, as good starting points for if you want to do the MIPS detection of polyphenols. And these two papers together are a good evidence of how to do it. Or good. And the nice thing about the way Hasim did it, he didn't do it on a boron-doped carbon electrode. He did it on a screen-printed gold electrode. So he's demonstrating in this paper, rather than doing it on a, on a tool that's really good for the lab, he's done it on a tool that's actually sort of scalable in manufacturing. So he has shown in principle the low-cost manufacture of a MIPS-based sensor. Admittedly, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, but I think you can take the same principles and have done it for phenols, and I can defend that opinion by showing the paper above. So carrying on with our sort of theme, the theme of today's talk, which is looking at DMA's kind of interests and saying, okay, well, if DMA wants to make biosensors, then we can definitely, or you can definitely do polyphenols using electrochemistry, either directly using something akin to the detection of chili, or actually using a recognition system like the MIPS technology. But now I want to go on to talk about sensors for antioxidants. So I'm going to sort of, it's known in the literature that oxidative stress, if you have oxidative stress, then your ability to resist viruses and diseases goes down. And if you're under oxidative stress, then you can end up getting damage of macromolecules within your body. And this paper is just an example of where, unfortunately, somebody's undergoing chemotherapy and it's reduced their total antioxidative status, TAS, total antioxidative status. Their ability to resist oxidation has gone down. So from here to here, there's been a reduction due to the chemotherapy. So it's important. The ability to resist oxidative stress is important. Your natural ability to resist this oxidative stress can come through partly through diet and the types of foods that you consume. Now, the problem with these oxidants is they lead to a series of molecules which can go on to sort of damage tissue. They can go on to damage the DNA, and they can go on to damage lipids. So it's good to have antioxidants, because then they will neutralize these oxidants, and basically it'll be good for, it's better for one's health. So these reactive oxidative species, they can be stopped with molecules like ascorbate and uric acid, the carotenoids and the flavonoids. And so some of these molecules are those sort of phenols and polyphenols that we were discussing earlier on. So there's generally, there's several assays in order to measure oxidative molecules. There's FRAP, and then there's TAS. So FRAP is the ferret-reducing antioxidation potential, I think, is FRAP. And then there's TAS, total antioxidative status. So in a FRAP assay, what's generally happening is you have an iron 3 center, and in the presence of an antioxidant, it becomes an iron 2 center. So people often do FRAP assays using absorption spectroscopy. Now, I'm obviously a keen advocate of electrochemistry, so I will also say that you can translate a FRAP assay onto a disposable screen printed electrode. So I've done some investigation around this, and so I found a couple of papers. So the molecule that's used in the FRAP assay is called TPTZ, and so it's an ion center, and it's surrounded by these chelates, and it's actually electrochemically active. So the molecule itself is electrochemically active, and so if you bought this molecule and you made a solution of it and you put it on a screen printed electrode, for example, a carbon electrode or gold electrode, you would be able to get the electrochemical profile for the molecule. Now, in this paper, it's quite nice because they use cocoa powder, and they claimed, and it has an antioxidative property. And they were able to show that the electrochemical profile or the cyclovoltammetry of this signal changed as the cocoa had these polyphenols in it. So it sort of ties back to the original part of this presentation today, that you can detect polyphenols directly, but you can also then detect their antioxidative behavior using something like a FRAP assay. And it comes back to some of the the talks that we've done, that electrochemistry is very powerful. Many molecules can be analyzed by it, and we are reusing the techniques now. How many times have we mentioned cyclovoltammetry? And so you can see that it doesn't take very once one starts in electrochemistry, suddenly the opportunities to really explore and do some good science, there's a lot of opportunities. And the nice thing is, often people have already done some preliminary work, but then you can come along and improve it, or more importantly, translate it into a way that actually it could become a product. So we're discussing here that you can measure polyphenols either directly. You can also measure their antioxidative behavior using a electrochemical version of the FRAP assay. And there's also another assay called the TAS assay, and TAS uses a molecule called ABTS. So ABTS is this kind of conjugated molecule, and it's the similar story to the TAS above. The assay above was called FRAP, and it used the TPTZ. TAS is using ABTS, but ABTS also has an electrochemical profile. So you can get a cyclovoltammogram out of it. And what's nice is you can do a simple experiment where you just record the CV of ABTS, and then you can add a polyphenol in there, and the signal will change considerably. And the transition from no polyphenol to the polyphenol signal is proportional to the concentration of the antioxidants. So you can measure, for example, the polyphenols directly on an electrode, similar to our chili sensor. You can measure polyphenols using MIPS technology, and Hasim's definitely the guy to kind of have a chat to. If you go into the Discord server, Hasim's often in there. Have a chat with him about making MIPS. But then, if you're more interested in the properties of these molecules, their antioxidative properties, then there are the FRAP and the TAS assay, which can both be converted into electrochemical assays, and you can use those to measure the properties. And I want to talk about a third way of measuring the antioxidative properties, and that's using redox probes. So I really like this subject of measuring antioxidation or antioxidants, because in our first talks, we talked about there kind of being, I talked about voltammetry, and I talked about potentiometry, and I talked about chronoamperometry. And today I've definitely talked about voltammetry, and now I'm actually going to talk about potentiometry. So there is such a thing as a redox probe, and a redox probe, they're often quite bulky. They're definitely not a low-cost disposable sensor, but if you pull them apart, they have a reference electrode and they have a platinum electrode. So in principle, they're actually quite simple. You take this probe, you stick it into a solution that you want to measure, and it will give you the ORP, the oxidative reductive potential of that solution. And here I took this off the web, where they show that different solutions like green tea and vitamin C have a sort of negative ORP, and then things like soft drinks that are kind of, synonymous with maybe not being so great for you, have this higher ORP. But what it says is you can measure the antioxidative status of foods quite simply using a potentiometric sensor like a redox probe. And the redox probe is just platinum and a reference electrode. And the nice thing about, screen printed electrodes, you can definitely get a platinum electrode with a reference electrode screen printed next to it. So you can reduce all of this functionality into something that's low cost. So make a low cost screen printed electrode for it. And it's interesting because, in fact, now this product I'm showing you is not our product. I'm using it as an example that you can actually commercialize some of these things for specific applications. I'm not. This example is actually for male fertility. They're measuring the redox potential of male semen and saying, if it's depending on the status of the redox potential, they say whether that the semen is good for fertilization or not. But what they're really demonstrating here is the idea that actually they have, a screen printed electrode, which is not so dissimilar to the ones I'm showing here. They have tuned this system to be used to have what's going on here is they probably have a port so they can pipette the sample on. There's a little microfluidic chamber. So effectively, is a very nice, simple demonstration that you can actually use some of these technologies that I'm describing in specific applications. And this one, it's in male fertility, but it's literally in the end just a potentiometer, the meter itself, and a screen printed electrode. And you as they show in the picture, you just pipette the sample on. So I'm going to sort of wrap up now on my last slide, but today we wanted to focus specifically on a piece of research by one of the members. And when I looked at the members research interests, I kind of saw polyphenols, and therefore we've discussed that you can take a polyphenol and a screen printed electrode, for example, and just do the cyclovoltammetry on it, for example, and immediately get a sort of signal for this. You can actually build in a bit more sophistication into the product and go for MIPS, molecular imprinted polymers. Now, if you want to measure the properties of the food rather than specific analytes within the food, then you're going towards making an electrochemical assay based on FRAP or TAS, or you can use a Redox probe itself. So FRAP and TAS are voltammetry, and Redox is potentiometry, but you can reduce down. You can measure the antioxidative properties of these foods using these technologies. And then we finish just with an example that, it was a very different application from food, but in fact, when you look at this technology, it simply is a Redox screen printed electrode that's been tuned to be used in a specific application, which is male fertility. So I have been watching the YouTube streaming next to me, so I can see that Hasim is there. So Hasim, if you want to make any comments on the YouTube stream, I can see them. But that was what we had for today. So our intention is to do another presentation next week. And then I think in the first week of August, we're going to do a much bigger webinar and do some live demos on electrochemical impedance spectroscopy. So that's my sort of little video stream for today. We'll carry on doing these members-only live video streaming for a couple. We'll do them every Thursday, apart from when we actually do the big live streaming. And as I say, the next big live streaming, I think, is in the first week of August, and we're going to do impedance spectroscopy. And I'm going to have a couple of demonstrations going on impedance spectroscopy from our lab, as we've done in the past. So, Hasim, if you, I'm going to get into the Discord server there. So if anyone wants to have a quick chat afterwards, I'll be in the Discord server. I appreciate you guys' time today, and hopefully chat to you online or maybe see you next week. All right, I appreciate it very much, and I will speak to you all soon.